Welcome to the Coaches Spotlight Podcast, the show where you'll be listening to coaches from around the globe that share their pitfalls and struggles all the way up to what made them successful in their field. Ready to catapult your coaching business past the competition? Then grab your favorite beverage and get ready to listen to meaningful conversations and learn from industry experts. Here's your host, Oliver Momeni.
Hey everybody, I'm really excited as our first guest on the show is often featured on TV, major blogs, publications, left, right, and center, and on podcasts from around the world. She's an accomplished success coach, speaker, author of the book From Frustrated to Frickin Awesome, and host of the Frickin Awesome Entrepreneur podcast, as well as her brand new podcast, Making the List. But more than anything else, she's an exceedingly proud wife and mother of two who loves helping others discover how to own their perfect lopsidedness and learn to have it all. Please welcome Alissa Daire Nelson. Glad to have you on the show, Alissa.
Well, thanks for having me. This is super exciting to be here with you, Oliver.
Now, we always start off the show with getting an insight from our guests with what they're specialized in and what is the outcome they guide people towards. In other words, what is your signature coaching program?
Yeah, so my signature coaching program is called the Frickin Awesome Entrepreneur program. And I literally help business owners to have it all. I don't believe that your business exists in a vacuum. And so while business is the entry point, it is not at all where we finish. So we cover 8 different areas of your life as we work through the process, because one of the things that holds people back in business is not actually the fear of failure. It's the fear of success. What if my business takes off? Will I lose my spouse? Will I lose my health? Will I lose my integrity? Right? So, we'll talk a little bit about this, hopefully at some point today, about this balance idea, right? But like, if the business goes up, then what else goes down, right? If it's a zero-sum game, then what? And I help my clients to truly have it all. So that's what I specialize in.
So if you want to find out more about Alissa's program, head over to daretosucceed.com. Now, before we move on, for those of you that are a coach or a consultant, or you want to become one and have not created your signature program yet, then you're leaving a ton of money on the table. But no worries, I got you covered. My team and I have put together a guide that teaches exactly how to design your signature program. The exercises throughout the guide will systematically help you in creating a successful program all the way up to how much to charge for it. So if you want to grab a free copy of this guide, then head on over to coachesspotlight.com/guide. That's coachesspotlight.com/guide. Now, I need to say, in the pre-interview, I noticed this show is going to be different, as it's obvious we're riding on the same wave. When you just said having the fear of failure versus having the fear of success, I got goosebumps, which does happen once in a while on the show, depending if you guys press the right buttons. One thing is for sure, a lot of people don't see that fear of success is very real and often a misunderstood struggle. The key thing is to realize that overall, having this fear is about the consequences of success, not the success itself. And that is exactly what hindered me years ago, because I knew if I commit to something, I'm going to want to over-deliver over and over again. And that kept me from starting sooner. However, I gave myself a huge kick and pulled through because I knew if I don't, I'm doing a disservice to those that need my guidance, right?
Right.
And I see that so often, people not thinking of the fear that comes along with success, because they all talk about is the fear of failure.
It's a big thing, and most people don't recognize it out of the gate. But here's, what I tell my referral partners, is I want you to listen for people who say, I'm just trying to find some work-life balance. And I'm like, those are the people that I need to talk to, because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And they're trying so hard to get that scale to balance. And here's the thing is that life is fluid. So if you imagine, one of those classic balance scales, right? If anything, even if the weight is the same on both sides of the scale, if things on both sides of the scale are moving, the scale is moving. So if you're going to create that balance, right, where both sides are even, either you're not moving, right? Or it's only going to happen for a brief moment. So 99.9% of the time, you're setting yourself up for total epic failure. And so let's change the paradigm. Let's instead talk about, what does harmony look like? How can I truly have it all?
So true. And we're going to dig deeper on that one, that's for sure. But before we do, let me ask you to share with us a success quote or mantra and an example of how you have applied its meaning in your life, Alissa.
Yeah. So the life journey has always been a challenge for me. I've never I haven't naturally enjoyed the journey. I want to be at the destination. Like I want to get there, right?
Yeah.
At my core. And so one of the quotes that has helped me to embrace that is a Tony Robbins quote, and he says, "Life doesn't happen to you; it happens for you."
Yes.
And I love that because it allows you to embrace even the negative things as, all right, what can I learn from this? So the follow-up quote from that is, "I never lose, I either win or I learn." And if we apply that to every situation, now we can actually embrace, I can move forward with this risky thing or this scary thing, because even if I fail, I'm going to learn so much from it. And, the negative experiences that you might have had in your life, you can begin to look at them not from a place of regret or resentment, but from a place of, what did that teach me? How can I use that? And so I teach my girls this too. I have two daughters who are 12 and 14, that the obstacles in life, you can either use them to stop you as to be big boulders in your road, or you can use them as stepping stools. What do you choose? And I think that's so valuable, because now everything in life you can use.
Absolutely. And I love both quotes you mentioned. Life does not happen to you, it happens for you, by Tony Robbins. And I never lose, I either win or learn, by Nelson Mandela. Both are so true if you really think about them. Now, let's stay here for a moment and talk about failure. Alissa, take us back to a time in your life where you experienced failure. Tell us that story and share with us the lessons you have learned.
Yeah, boy, there are so many. Let's see, what shall I choose? Let's talk about, I launched a membership program a couple of years ago and invested a whole ton of money into the website build, invested a lot of money into the membership course that I learned, what to go through the process. And I launched as a beta, and it was great. And I had about 30-ish members, 20 to 30 members. And I couldn't keep up with the deliverables. Because I was also running a coaching practice, right? And that ended up being a failure. I ended up having to kind of call it and say, I can't follow through. And those are the types of failures that are, for me, the hardest, because now I'm letting others down. And that was really, really tough. But it was also really good, because there's no longer any fear there with launching a new program, because sometimes new programs fail. And it's okay to have that happen. I still have a lot of those assets, which I can use down the road, et cetera. And I already have. But that was really tough to let the members of my membership group let them down and feel like I had failed them. And also having felt like I overpromised. Like, I never want to be in a position, you already mentioned this, Oliver, where you're like, I'm going to over deliver. And that's always been my goal and what I intend to do. And I essentially overpromised and then under delivered. And that was really tough. That was really tough.
I can imagine. it's difficult asking this question without using the word failure, as it paves the path of the question. That said, I like to use it because I like to see how you guys turn it around into something positive. We should never forget, failing means getting feedback from life and learning from that feedback. Not forgetting, it's always about how we adjust and pivot, regardless what happens to us, let it be success or being defeated. The art is to learn how to deal with it when it does not go as planned. And the worst thing you can do is pull yourself down, because that's not going to help anyone, is it?
Exactly. If you take the failure as and it's the difference between understanding it as a behavior, right, as a circumstance,
Right.
or if you're taking it in as part of who you are, right? I am a failure versus I failed are two very, very different things. And so many people take on a situational failure as I am a failure. Look what I am capable or not capable of. And that's, I think, where people really put their feet in cement. And now they feel like they can't move forward because it wasn't a situation. It was they were the failure. And so differentiating those two things, and allowing yourself to separate from the identity of being a failure versus I failed at something, is a huge thing. And it seems like a little nuance, but it's giant.
I like how you separate that. You know, when I talk about failure or failing with my clients, and we specifically talk about the discovery call or strategy call or intro call, whatever you want to call it, and we talk about, okay, so how many calls do you need to turn that prospect into a client? Most of them say, yeah, I know, I need so many no's to get a yes. And I always say, yeah, well, you know, I don't like that analogy because the no has this negative vibe to it, right? So I turn that around and say to them, look, why don't you look at those calls as if you're playing a video game? And all of them are like, what? Say that again? I'm like, well, I'm a video game kid. I grew up in the 70s with Atari, which led up to PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, you name it. But it doesn't mean that I sit in front of the TV for hours. But I love playing and having fun, and that's what it's about. So I say to them, hey, look at these calls as a video game where you're playing, having fun, in the process trying to reach the next level. And in that specific case with those calls, it should be having fun, learning, you know, what you're doing, learning what you shouldn't do maybe next time, and then gradually getting to the point where you then turn that prospect into a client. And if you think about it, you can use the video game analogy for almost everything in life. Fact of the matter is, having fun in the process, reaching your goals, is the best way you can play any game. Let it be in life, let it be in a video game. It doesn't really matter. I always say, failing your way to success is the only way.
Right. And
right?
I mean, a lot of times we, in terms of success, we use sports analogies as well, right? So whether you use, baseball, where, someone who's batting, and I'm not super into baseball, so bear with me. I don't know what the best in batting is, but, if someone's batting, 300 or, whatever, like that's a really good batting average, right? And you think about that, well, that means they failed 7 times at the bat out of 10. And, there's a bajillion great, Michael Jordan quotes about how many shots he's missed. But the point is that they're willing to take more shots. They're willing to step up to the plate, literally and figuratively, to try again and to really shoot for excellence. One of the things that I think that holds coaches back in particular is that they tend to lead with a bleeding heart. They're really truly at their core helpers and healers, and so to come to a conversation, whether it's a discovery session, strategy session, whatever you want to call it, and think, oh, at the end of this, what if I did waste their time, right? So it has a lot to do with their own self-worth and some of those other things. It's a whole nother conversation, but they don't want to hurt that person. What if this person gets out of this conversation and doesn't find value? What if, I can't help this person? What if, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And then on top of that, they don't know how to charge for their value, right? So it becomes this, I'm just going to give all my stuff away for free. And I mean, there's a reason that, 80% plus of all coaches out there are broke.
Yep.
And it's very much because they don't want to charge people for something that they need because they need it. And so we have to break this pattern of leading with a bleeding heart to help them understand part of the investment process is for the client. Like, my clients pay me in part because they must have skin in the game in order for them to have their best success. And it's helping coaches really understand that nuance, that you're charging, yes, for you and so that you can pay your bills, but you're not charging for you. You're charging so that your clients get the best outcome they can get.
Now, getting back to what we talked about pre-interview and what you said now about the strategy call with coaches being worried if the prospect does not get any value out of the call, well, all I can say to those coaches is get back to the drawing board. And I'm saying that because if a coach is not 100% convinced that his or her call is going to make the prospect say, wow, can't believe what I got out of this free call, then the best thing to do is rethink your approach to strategy calls. Why? Because everybody and their mother is offering a free call. Whoopee. If your call does not have a tangible outcome that the prospect can walk away with, then I assure you, you're doing something wrong. In other words, you're treating these calls like they did 20 years ago. So the best place to start is give your call a proper title with what they'll gain from talking with you, regardless if they join your program or not. For example, lose 5 pounds by next week strategy call. If you don't give your call a title that pinpoints the outcome of the call, you're not setting yourself apart from all others that offer a free call. With that said, if you give them a taste of how it feels to coach with you, guess what's going to happen? They will start to imagine what it's like to really coach with you. With the effect, they'll consider wanting to know what you actually can do for them, i.e., what your program is about. And once that interest has been established, then we can break it down into bite-sized pieces of what the program is about. I always say a minimum of 3 months is the average time frame any coaching program should take, regardless of the coaching niche.
And here's the thing is that some coaches are afraid to ask that question. It is the best first question to ask in a strategy session or discovery call. What would make this hour the best value of your time spent, right?
Yes.
Or some variation of that question.
Exactly.
If you walked away after this hour, what would make this a valuable hour for you?
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to tell you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, fantastic. Let's go for that, because otherwise we're directing the call and it's not about us.
Nope.
It's about what does the person in front of us really need in that moment? And it might not be what you think, right? I'm a business coach. That's the entry point. But they might come to me and say, here's the thing is that my wife is getting so frustrated with me and is always nagging at me about how much time I spend at work. Great. Let's talk about that. Right? So it might not even be about what they actually put on their intake form. But if you just ask that question, now you can actually guide the conversation to what the person on the other end of it actually wants and needs.
Absolutely. Which leads me to ask you, Alissa, why and how come have you decided to become a success/business coach after spending over a decade in healthcare?
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing, right? And one of the things I also tell people is no education is ever wasted. I have two degrees, one in dietetics. I was a registered dietitian for 8 years, and then I went back to school. I got my nursing degree and worked as a bedside nurse and then a nurse care coordinator for several years. And during that time, I went through a divorce. And, it was a shock to my own system. I never intended, I don't think anybody intends to get married just to get divorced.
How long were you married before it happened?
8 years. 8 years.
All right.
Yep. So, and prior to that, we were together for 6 years. So we were together for quite a long time.
Wow.
My entire adult life, we got together when we were 18. And I didn't expect that I would be going through a divorce. And I'm like, I followed the plan that I had for myself and the plan that everybody else had for me too, right? Like, this is how you were supposed to do. You're supposed to, graduate college, find a boyfriend in college. And I happened to find him beforehand, get married, get a house, get a job, have kids. It's like, I'd done all the things and I was absolutely miserable. And what was that about? Now, is that on him? No, I have to own my own happiness. And that's one of the things that I discovered was like, I need to be my best me. And so I began going to therapy and I began diving into self-development. And in that same breath, I also was approached by somebody in a direct sales company, right? And I was like, well, this company's been around a long time. Like, can't be too much of a scam. And that was literally my thought process.
Right.
And I was scared because here I was, a single mom now. I was the only one putting a roof over my two kids' heads. We had joint custody, right? But that particular home, that was on me to pay for that. And the nurses were threatening a strike. And I didn't know it then. I know it now that happens every time we come up with a nursing contract. Every 3 years, that's part of the conversation. But I was really afraid. And so what would happen if the nurses went on strike and I didn't have any income? And so out of fear, I joined this direct sales company. And I thought, well, if I'm going to try this thing, I'm going to run it like a business. And the irony is, and this is where, all things lead you to your highest good. It came from a place of arrogance. My process was, well, I have 2 degrees. Like, if I'm going to do this thing, then I'm going to do it with excellence. And in part, that was my drive towards excellence, but it also came from a place of arrogance, really. And so I started to read every book I could. I started to go to every conference I could. I went to every workshop I could. I began hiring my own coaches to learn how to run a business. In direct sales, and this was a direct sales company where you actually manage the inventory yourself. So I was literally running a brick and mortar out of my home, an incredibly hard business to be in. And on top of that, you can't pay your bills on product sales alone. You had to recruit. And so there's all these different areas of challenge in this particular business setup, right? And so I was like, well, let's see what I can do. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it well. And I actually ended up quitting my nursing job to pursue this thing full time. And through that process, and again, I'd hired coaches all along the way, what I realized was I didn't want to recruit anybody into my dream. I wanted to recruit them into their own. And so I wasn't willing to recruit people, and I was good at selling. I could sold a lot of product and all of that, but I didn't want to sell them into my dream. You know what I mean? And so
dig a little bit deep on that one.
Yeah. So, ultimately, yes, you're, in any network marketing or direct sales business, you're opening up an opportunity for them. And that's exactly what happened for me, right? If I had not joined that business, I would not have found my love for coaching. But it was a very difficult business. And I had seen a lot of people run themselves into a huge amount of debt going into this business when they had no business going into this business, right? And so I wouldn't recruit people who I knew that was going to be the case for. And statistically, 9 out of 10 would do anything with their business. And, 9 out of 10 would do nothing with their business. Only 1 out of 10 would do something with their business. And out of the 1% or the 10% that did do something with their business, only 10% of them actually thrived. So now we're talking 1 in 100. And I wasn't willing to recruit the other 99. Right.
Right.
And set them up for failure. And that's this whole conversation about direct sales and network marketing is a whole nother conversation. And I do believe that there's a way to do that with high integrity and correctly. But it just wasn't for me. I didn't want to recruit them into, you coming onto my team is going to benefit me in some way, even if you don't succeed. And that was really tough for me. And so I was like, well, what if we just take that all off the table? I have no agenda other than their success. Because I knew how to do that. I knew how to pull their dreams out of them and help them to clear the clouds and create a vision that they could now pursue. And I could help them build a strategy around that. I knew I could do that. So a month after I had that epiphany moment, and it was a moment of epiphany, I had my business cards, and a month after that, I had my first client, and, through a very, very bumpy road, here I am over 5 years later.
When you just said epiphany, I was like, okay, so there is a pattern to the answers I'm getting when I ask that question, because no one really stands up in the morning and says, today I'm going to become a coach. There's always something that happens up front that you come to the point even thinking of becoming a coach. In my case, all started 35 years ago when I was 15 reading a book. Wait a sec, just dated myself there, didn't I? Nah, it doesn't matter. Turning 50 this year. Woohoo! The book had the title, The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy, which is a must-read for any coach, regardless of their industry. Now, as I just mentioned, all started for me when I was 15, but it took decades to enter the coaching world where I now coach coaches. If you want to find out why I started coaching 12 years ago, then go and listen to the first episode of this podcast where I talk about why and how I started my coaching business. The bottom line is you need to have skin in the game if you want to become a great coach.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really interesting as you're talking about, people who, don't just wake up one day and want to become a coach. I have certainly seen many of those people who are like, I love helping people, so I'm just going to become a coach. It's like, okay, talk to me again in a month if that's still what you want to do, right?
Exactly.
Because I think that's one of the myths, or if you want to call it that, is that people think, well, if I'm a helper, then I should become a coach. And, another thing I have heard from people is, well, people are always coming to me for advice, so I think I should become a coach. And that's not like become a consultant if that's what you want. If people are coming to you for advice, coaching is a very different thing. And I always try to parse out for people the difference between training and consulting and coaching and facilitating, because they're very different skill sets. And you can definitely do both, right? And I tell people, okay, I'm putting on my trainer hat right now, and this is what, or my consultant hat, and this is what I'm going to tell you from my experience. This is what I think you should do. Try that on. Does that fit for you, right? But coaching is all about pulling it out of them.
Yes.
And trusting that they have what it takes on the inside. And, my goal for my clients is to help them feel completely empowered and like they can do it on their own. I don't ever want my clients to depend on me, because then their success is on my shoulders, A, and B, they don't find that inner strength to really know, that inner knowing that they can do it.
Exactly.
So a great coach will help their clients believe in themselves, not believe in you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. If they don't have the belief in themselves, they most likely are not going to reach the end of any coaching program. And those type of people will turn around and blame you, or better said, blame the program and say, I knew it. That wouldn't have worked anyway. So when I have my strategy calls, I am very strict who I choose to work with. If they aren't 110% committed, I don't take them on. Now, of course, at the beginning when I started, I wasn't as picky, but the longer you do this, the more you cherry pick who you're going to let into your program.
I actually tell people that in that first conversation is I am interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me.
Absolutely.
This has to be a good fit for
Yep.
both of us.
Now, I do understand when you're starting off, you are not as strict because you want to get your coaching business off the ground. However, you need to keep in mind if they are not committed and they don't reach the overall goal, it will color off on you with you thinking, maybe I didn't coach them properly, or you might even start doubting yourself if you're cut out for this. So keep in mind, the sooner you have a set guideline that they need to fulfill, the more likely you will work with people that will follow through and reach the outcome you both agreed upon on the strategy call.
Yep, I agree with that. And we've all taken on clients that weren't good for us.
Sure.
In part because we believe in people, right? That's part of what we do. And that's why, Oliver, you had said, it has to be at least 3 months. And I agree with that. And for me, I take on clients for a commitment of 3 months, but only 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a probationary period. Are we at the end of this, and I measure a whole bunch of things, so that at the end, it's not like, does this feel good? That's not good enough. That's not good enough. Were there results? Right. And so if you're listening out there and you're a coach, find some way to measure success for your clients. This is vital because it can't just quote feel good. There has to be some results to that. So we get to the end of that 3 months and we go, okay, did you make the progress that we were hoping to make? Have you made progress along the way, in a measurable, objective way? And if the answer is no, then it's no longer a good fit to work together. Right. And no fault, right? No fault needs to be had there, but maybe the client didn't follow through with their commitments. And, even if you had an accountability process in place, they just didn't follow through. And I've had clients like that where it's like, in fact, I had one fairly recently, and I could see all of the success in her. I could see it and I knew it was there, and I'm ready and I'm ready and I'm ready. And I've failed a bunch of times before. And my husband says, he doesn't want me signing up for another coach because he doesn't think I'm going to actually follow through. I'm like, okay, are you ready to commit to making those changes? And week after week after week, she would show up to the call and not do things. And we tried a whole bunch of different series of accountability cycles with her. And ultimately, she just was too much in her own way. And did I reflect on that and go, okay, how could I be a better coach? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a lot of that, but ultimately I cannot make her, move her feet. And so at the end of our 3 months, we stopped working together. And it broke my heart, right? Like it's okay to feel feelings. It broke my heart because I can still see it in her. I know she's got it in her. The question is, when is she going to be ready for it? And I don't have the answer for that. We uncovered a whole bunch of stuff, but I think there probably is something else that she needs. And this was a process along her way. And unfortunately, this 3 month experience for her wasn't the breakthrough experience. And that was really, really hard to have a client that didn't have immense success, because that's typically what my clients do have. But ultimately, it comes down to, is the client ready to make those changes? And, she holds no animosity towards me, which is great. Obviously, I would prefer that, right? But at the same time, it's still heartbreaking to not have that success at the end. But you can't be afraid of that as a coach going into like, what if they don't get the success? It was another thing along their way that will help them succeed in the future. And that's how you have to think about it.
Absolutely. Like I said before, if you're not strict enough, it's going to backfire on you big time in some way, shape, or form. If you don't feel that they will put in what it takes to make your program work, then don't touch them and let them go, because there is nothing worse than getting on a call, knowing they will not be any closer to what they said they want to accomplish. And that drains so much energy from us. And to me, it doesn't make sense to take these people on board, regardless how much they want to pay me. Because at the end of the day, it's about who do I want to serve and truly help reach the outcome they desire.
It does drain. And boy, it was one of those things, and I've reflected back on this particular client many, many times, because she said all the right things. And I asked those questions like, are you actually ready this time? Because I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. And there were some coaching sessions that were not fun, right? Where I really had to call her out and go, hey, what is holding you back from making this, this, and this? And then the very next day. And fact of the matter is, I probably should have cut the contract before that 3 months was up, because I saw signs that she wasn't following through. That being said, I'm like, sometimes it just takes a little extra time. And so, like, no matter what, there's going to be times where you take on clients, and she checked all the boxes, right? She was all the right things. She was the right kind of entrepreneur. She was all those things. And still sometimes, it doesn't always quote work. And you have to be okay with some of that kind of failure, even if you're only taking on the right clients. But you're going to take on a whole lot more of those clients if you're not strict, as you said, Oliver, to who is it that I'm serving? Who can I truly help?
Serving is one thing, guiding is another, but they are actually the same. And I say that because our company is split up into two parts. One half of the company serves local businesses with a done-for-you service that generates leads and customers for them. And the other half of the company guides coaches and shows them how to generate a consistent flow of clients for their business. Now, it does not matter which type of client we help. It all boils down to how committed each party is for us to help them, because you'll always have the one or other that is not going to invest all it takes, no matter if they're coaching or consulting with us. And as you just said, Alissa, some people say all the right things, check all the boxes that indicate they are a good client to take on, but they don't put in the work that is required for us to reach the outcome they desire. And I've experienced that a few times, that no matter how strict I am with accepting clients, some people still find a way to slip through the cracks.
Right. And that's one thing that I vet out during that initial conversation as well. And for me, instead of doing regular strategy sessions, I do coaching sessions. I'm like, let's experience what coaching is together. But are they coachable? If they already have all the answers, they're not coachable.
Nope.
And so, I do absolutely look for, do you have an answer for everything? Or is there some curiosity? Is there some curiosity, some openness to thinking about things from a different perspective, to digging a little deeper? And if there's not, they're just not ready. And that's okay.
Totally. Is there anything you would have done differently before you began your career as a coach? And if so, what was it exactly?
It's such an interesting question, really, Oliver, because as I said, you you experienced what you experienced because you need to experience it, right? And it's all a process along the way. So I hold zero regrets about my process and my journey. That being said, I would have focused on one stream of income first and filling that stream of income before trying to move on to and forcing myself into, well, maybe I should do group coaching, and maybe I should do this, and maybe I should do that, right? I absolutely got distracted by shiny object syndrome, which I do use the Strengths Finder with all my clients, right? So I've got a strength theme called Activator.
Gallup. You mean Gallup?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Love it. And I've got Activator in my top 5. Activator loves to sprint, and it loves new experiences, right? So, I would have bridled that Activator a little bit more to really stay the course on certain things. Pivots are important, but I pivoted all the time, right? And I didn't give myself a chance to succeed at one thing before moving into it next. So that would have been one thing. It's just focus on one dang thing at a time.
Right.
That would have been great.
Now, you touched upon my next question already a bit, but let's dive deeper. I would like that you share a story with us of a time in your journey when you had an aha moment. Take us back to that very moment and talk about the steps you took to turn that aha moment into success, Alissa.
You know what? I'm actually going to take a current one. This is being recorded right in the midst of COVID, and it's rocked the entire world. Right? I started on this journey of giving up control and letting the universe lead my life. Really, and I equate it to dancing, partner dancing. Right? The man in the dance partnership is the one who leads, right? That's how ballroom dancing works.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for the partnership to be successful, the woman needs to let the man lead. And I was trying to figure out what might that look like to let the universe or God lead my life.
Ah.
To be present enough and quiet enough to listen to those little movements, let's call it, right? So that I know to step left or to step right, because I tend to be a control freak at my core. And so I even remember exactly the moment that it happened in June of 2016, where I decided, I'm going to figure this out, how to let the higher power lead my life. And this tug and pull but God gave me 2 feet and 2 hands for a reason. Like I need to go move, and he gave me a brain for a reason. Like I need to go move, and trying to figure that out. And it's taken me a very, very long time to really do that. Now, here's the beauty in COVID is that what it did was it stripped everybody's illusion that we have control over anything external.
Yep.
And that really is a gift if you allow it to be a gift. And so what's interesting is I've had almost zero anxiety, and anxiety comes from a place of worrying about what the future is, right? And if you let go and allow the universe to take care of things, you can let go of anxiety. Right? Far easier said than done. Like I said, it's taken me 4 years to learn this lesson. But there's such a peace about not having control, and also in the same breath, having all of the control, because I have control over my own self. I have control over my mindset. I have control over whether I actually do meditate and get quiet in the morning. I have control over whether I remind myself of the truth, which is what I consider affirmations to be. I have control over how I choose to show up, right? And I have control over watching for and welcoming in the abundance that the universe has for all of us. And so COVID has actually solidified that lesson for me, that I don't have any control over the external, but man, do I have ultimate control over the internal. And of course, as coaches, we all get that in our heads. Objectively, cerebrally, we get that. But to really embrace it in our hearts, that for me was a 4-year-long journey. And it's really exciting to me that I have gotten that lesson. Now, will old stories come up again? Of course, because we don't live in a linear universe. But for the most part, that's where I'm living now. I feel like I've finally gotten that lesson, and that's been life-changing.
Nodding the whole time as you were talking. The times we are in now are more positive than negative. And when I say that, people are like, what? And I answer, well, look at it from a different angle. That it's negative with what's going on the planet is obvious. But how about looking at it and turning it into a positive? Look into the future of the next 10, 20 years to come, because this is a lesson that we're not going to forget, right?
Yes.
I see it this way. 2008 was Disneyland versing to what's going on now and the effect it will have on humanity.
Yeah. What's interesting is if you can remain an anxious, frantic mind cannot do good. It can't do what it's capable of doing. Right. And pulling from my years in healthcare, right? Like if you are freaking out, if you are panicking, you cannot help the person in front of you. Right. So what do we need to do in order to be calm, and in order to have a rested head. And so for the people that I'm talking to, both my clients and people who are not my clients right now, that's what I'm focusing on is how can you get calm and how can you get rested? And, many people aren't sleeping because they're worried, right?
Sure.
And so how can you give up the anxiety and the stress just for 8 hours? It's all going to be there in the morning again. So just go get some sleep. And that's very counterintuitive, right? Because people are like, I need to do something. I need to do something. No, what you need to do is go to sleep.
I like
go to
that.
sleep and get calm because the calmer you are, the more innovative you can be.
So true.
Right. And so the people who I see who are beginning to emerge from this, and I do believe there's already an emergence, are the people who go, what else could be? How might we, right? Asking those big open-ended questions. How might we, still serve our clients in this different time? How might we be able to do X, Y, and Z? Those are the people who are going to be able to make it through this. And absolutely, there are going to be a lot of businesses that shutter during this time. And that's real. And that's something that it's okay to grieve. And there are people who are getting sick and there are people who are losing their lives to this thing. Those are very real, sobering, and legitimately sad things. And also there's hope in it. And so, if you're listening and you're still freaking out about COVID, right? And what is this going to look like? And what is it going to look like tomorrow? Go get some sleep because you will be able to think much better on a rested head and get out of your own head, right? Get out of your own head. And this is where affirmations, I think, really come to the center is what is true, right? Not what is, quote, reality right now, but what is true. And if you can start to repeat the truth, right, you can start to drown out some of the negative stuff that keeps swirling around in your head. And that takes work. It takes an intentional effort. But it's that internal game that you do have control over when so many people are focused on the external. How can I get back control of the external? And you couldn't anyway. So let's focus on the internal instead.
So true. But it's also natural because people have been conditioned to look at it in an external way, but now have been forced to look at it in a different way. And that is something new to them, right? And before, they didn't need to, as they were occupied with other things in life. Let it be taking the kids to school, going to work, etc., etc. But now they've had time to reflect and look inside. I mean, we're talking 3.8 billion people are at home. This has never happened in human history, and people are getting bored and don't know what to do with themselves. In my case, I said I'm going to launch this podcast, although I've been dabbling with ideas since over 6 months. But I said now or never. And behalf of not being able to jump on my motorcycle and ride through the mountains or go fishing in the Mediterranean Sea, it does not bother me that much being on lockdown as I work from home since 12 years. Which leads me to ask you, Alissa, what is the one common myth about being a coach that you want to debunk?
That everybody should do it and everybody could do it. And actually quite following that is that coaches are simply encouragers, right? Like if you're an encouraging person, you should definitely be a coach. No. That, the skill that's brought to a great coaching practice is so much more than just, kind of giving someone a punch in the arm and encouraging them to the next step. And so that's one of the things I think that there are a lot of people who jump into, I'm going to be a coach, and don't realize that it is far more than just being encouraging and giving good advice.
I couldn't agree with you more, as becoming a coach is not something that should be entered lightly. It is a very important role, which done correctly can make a massive difference in empowering others and helping them make, meet, and exceed goals in both their personal and professional lives. That said, it can also do a lot of harm entering the coaching world if you're not aware about the responsibility that comes with it. Now, let's shift gears. We've talked about what I'm going to ask you next in our pre-interview, but I said, let's talk about it during the show. You don't believe in work-life balance. Share with us why you don't believe in it.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I mentioned earlier in the episode here that, balance is unattainable. And so what I really try to help people understand is this idea of work-life harmony. So if you think of a symphony, right? Think of an orchestra. You've got all kinds of different instruments, right? And players in your orchestra. If you're busy being the violin player, okay, you can't be the conductor. And so moving from being a player in your orchestra to being the conductor, that's true empowerment, right? So in any symphony, the violin section doesn't play the same amount as the horn section, as the percussion section, et cetera, right? They don't play the same amount. It's not about even. It's about what sounds good together. And in addition, they're all playing the same music, right? They're all reading off of the same sheet music. So, and sometimes you're going to get a violin solo, and sometimes, all the instruments are playing at the same time. But the key is they're all playing the same music. Can you imagine if you had one, the violin section playing Bach, and then you had the percussion section playing, I don't know, Guns N' Roses or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then right? It would be a disaster.
Right.
And so, it's all about getting every piece of your life on the same page. It doesn't mean they get equal time. It means they all get a part in your symphony. And so when we start thinking about it that way, there's going to be seasons where maybe you're in the midst of a product launch, right? Where that violin section is getting a solo, right? But you're communicating with the other sections, right? Or maybe you've got, a time where you've got a sick child, or you've had some more things that are going on at home, and they need more of your time and energy than they would have normally. That's also okay. It's not about balancing that with work. It's about harmonizing it. And so when we shift from this idea of zero-sum game balance to harmony, now you can go, oh, yeah, I guess if I communicate, hey, babe, I'm my husband, wife, whatever. I need to, for this period of time, I need to spend a little extra time at work because I've got this project going. It's an entirely different conversation than just not showing up to home until, 8:00 at night or something. And then having this argument about, you don't give me enough time and da, 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 da. Communicate, right? And get everybody on the same page. And so, it is a lot of communication, and it is a lot of setting your priorities and going, what is the sheet music that's in front of us right now? And that is the journey of getting all of what you want in your life.
I find it interesting you take a symphony as a comparison, as it pretty much pinpoints with what you're saying, that not every instrument plays even, but all play a role during the orchestra, as they're all playing the same music. And I couldn't agree with you more that life is not much different, as everything around us is important and plays a role. However, it's all about understanding how to keep it in harmony with each other, and all starts and ends with communicating what's happening around us. Love it. Alissa, let me ask you something else. Do you see it as a requirement being certified as a coach, or do you think people can start their coaching business and get certified later on?
That's a yes and, right? I started my coaching business without a certification out of the gate. I'd had my own experience with coaches, but I was not certified when I started. I very quickly, however, did enroll in a certification program. And I did that in part from myself. Because I needed to feel like I was qualified. Most people don't ask me how many certifications I've had. Most coaches are lifelong learners, so we kind of go and we get more and more and more certifications. But I don't believe it's a requirement, but does it enhance your practice? Absolutely. And it's also a question of, are you doing a combination of coaching and consulting? If you've had 20 years of experience in a particular industry and that is your industry niche, then you're probably walking in as more of a consultant than a coach, but that also might be okay. So I do think, I do think it's helpful. I don't think that any coaching, no coaching certification program that I've ever seen teaches you how to run a business, which is a very different thing than learning how to be a great coach. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. But I also know why so many people hinder themselves with thinking they need to get certified before they start, because that has been taught to us since we were kids, all the way up to completing high school and then going to college. It was always about getting good grades and getting a diploma at the end, right? But what they don't see is what you just said, Alissa, and you nailed it, is that no coaching certification is going to show them how to run a coaching business. However, it does not mean you should never get certified as a coach, because what a certification will do is give you structure and a framework with how to lead your clients through your coaching program. And that is definitely helpful, but it should not keep you from stepping into the coaching world because you think you need to be certified first before you're allowed to help others.
Yeah. Now it's an interesting nuance too, though. I do believe that this will change because, coaching is a completely unregulated field. And I think that poses dangers to the field because anybody can hang out their shingle and call themselves a coach. And so I do believe that there is some major introspection that needs to be had before you do hang out that shingle. Pursuing great coaching, because like I said, giving advice and encouraging people is not great coaching. And so there is that, and that's why it's a yes and. I do believe that the industry will move forward to become a much more regulated field. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I think you will need to be certified before you get out there and put your coaching hat on, as it were. That all said, right now it's not that way. And if you go out there and do start your practice, recognize that no coaching program that teaches you how to coach is going to teach you how to run a business. And running a business is yes, you have to get those clients, and cash flow is king, and you've got to bring the business in, but it's all the other back end stuff too. Do you know how to run your books? Do you know how to do all of these other things, administrative things, to actually help your business run along? And coaching programs aren't going to teach you that. But a certification can give you the inner confidence to know that you're doing well by your clients.
One thing is for sure, no certification is going to get anybody magically new clients. Did you know 87% of coaches or consultants from around the globe go out of business in their first year? And the main reason why they go out of business is because they didn't figure out how to generate a steady stream of new clients. Therefore, my team and I have created a workshop that outlines exactly what we do to generate a consistent stream of new clients month in, month out for our business and for our clients. So if you're a coach or consultant and you're committed to changing more lives with your expertise, then I encourage you to register for the free masterclass. Just imagine to never wonder where your next clients are going to come from next month. And all you need to do to make that a reality is head over to clientsindroves.com. That's clientsindroves.com and register for the free training. Alissa, are you ready for the Thunder Round?
Let's do the Thunder Round.
All right. If you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't, and what would the answer be to that question?
Boy, we've had a really good conversation. I don't know. I mean, there's always little things, right? Oh boy, this is a Thunder Round. I'm feeling the pressure. I guess I don't know what you might have asked me. You asked me how I started and how I'm continuing and all of that. Oh, maybe, how about this? Can you coach effectively in this digital space that we're all living in versus face to face? And the answer is yes, we can.
Was there anything holding you back from becoming a coach? And if so, what was it exactly?
It was my own self-worth. It was my own, do I have something to offer here in a legitimate way? And actually, on top of that, it was, I couldn't figure out what my business name was. And so that's a conversation for another day, but it ended up being what I was put on this earth for. And Daire is my maiden name. And so who I was when I was put on this earth was Alissa Daire. And when I got remarried, I took back my maiden name as my legal middle name. So it is not a hyphenated name, but Alissa Daire Nelson is actually my name. And that's where Daire Success Coaching came from.
If you could go back in time and meet the 20-year-old Alissa, what advice would you give yourself?
Give yourself some grace. Just stop beating yourself up and give yourself some grace.
What is the one thing most people don't know about you?
I am such a complete open book. There's not much. However, I fold fitted sheets better than anybody else I know.
If you could meet one person you have not met yet, what would you ask them, or what would you want to know from them?
Living or dead?
Either or.
Okay. I would love to, and this is a very standard answer, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but I would love to have met Jesus Christ. And I would love to have had a conversation with him about higher power and connecting to that higher power.
What is the best advice you have ever received?
Gosh, so much. I think that it would have to be from my current coach, who I've been working with for about 1.5 years. And that is to stop when I'm scrambling, to stop.
Share with us one of your habits that you believe has helped you become successful, Alissa.
Yes, I would say it's my morning routine. I first learned of a great morning routine through Hal Elrod, who wrote The Miracle Morning. And it's really leaning into that first, filling my cup first before jumping off into my day.
Now, before I ask you what your favorite book is, tell us about your book, which is called From Frustrated to Frickin Awesome.
Yes. So I wrote that book to really help people self-develop, right? Get the self-development piece, but also give them something that's tactical and practical. And I hadn't seen a book that really did a good job of bringing the two together. And so that's where From Frustrated to Frickin Awesome came from, was let's really embrace the amazingness of who you are. And let me walk you through how to do that. And then now let's go put your feet into action. So that's where the book came from. And it's nice and short and sweet. It's very actionable, and has lots of activities all throughout the book.
Sounds very promising. But let's dive a bit deeper, Alissa. Share with us the 4 steps of the Frickin Awesome process you talk about in your book.
Yeah, so there's 4 steps to the Frickin Awesome process, and none of them are rocket science, right? But the first one is to know thyself. Dig deep, know thyself. Who are you and what makes you great? The second step is to create a plan. Third step is to fulfill the plan. And the fourth step is to pause and reflect. And then you start the cycle all over again. And, the thing is that, again, right, not rocket science, right, Oliver? But almost everybody skips at least one of those steps. Gotcha. And so that's the Frickin Awesome process.
Very interesting. It looks like I'm going to grab myself a copy. That said, share with us, what is your favorite book and why?
My favorite book is actually The Alchemist. And it's not my favorite book because of what most people think of The Alchemist. I love The Alchemist because of the journey of the boy through the book. And because that has been such an important lesson for me to enjoy the journey or embrace the journey. That is what I love about the book. And the audiobook is narrated by Jeremy Irons. So that's, he's got a great voice.
Then let's wrap up this podcast with the last question, and then we'll say goodbye. Who do you specifically work with, and who should contact you if they want to work with you? Basically, who is your ideal client?
Yeah, great. So I work with 2 different specific populations. One is the soul entrepreneur who is in the helping and healing fields, in part because that's exactly where I came from, and helping them to really run a successful business. And the other is very fast growing businesses. And I specifically focus on Minnesota-based fast growing businesses. Daire Success Coaching's overarching mission is to elevate the entire economy of Minnesota, not because Minnesota is the only one that matters, but because we can bleed out from there, and affect the world from that perspective. And it's so fun really elevating the businesses here, and then the communities they serve, and the employees they serve, et cetera. So that's where the Making the List podcast came from. Is these are all Minnesota-based Inc. 5000 CEOs, and the Inc. 5000 list is the list of the 5,000 fastest growing businesses by percent in the U.S., privately owned businesses. And so it's just a really exciting, fast-moving group of businesses. They're growing fast, and they're small, so they're agile, really fun businesses to work with.
So if you want to connect with Alissa, head over to dare2succeed.com. That's dare, the number 2, succeed.com, or visit coachesspotlight.com and type Alissa in the search bar, and you'll find the show notes to this episode and all the links that lead to Alissa. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Alissa, it was a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Oliver. It was a joy being here.
Thank you for tuning in to the Coaches Spotlight podcast. If you liked the show, then please make sure to rate us, leave a review, and subscribe. We appreciate your support. See you next time.